My name is Deja Melby, and I am so delighted to have you with me today. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedules to hear about my innovative instructional idea today. I'm really excited to share some background with you about how I came to this work and my continuing evolving use of OER and other resources as I move through this. So I'm so very happy to have you with me. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And when I do that, I won't be able to hear you. So if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and my host will help by asking. Or if you have something burning, you can also feel free to interrupt me. I love interactive sessions. So this isn't just a set and get. Please feel free to interrupt and ask questions. I will also have a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen. And at this point in time, you should be able to see my presentation. I certainly hope so. Someone please let me know if you cannot. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today, I am talking about learning roadmaps. And again, this is my innovative way of delivering content to my students. This is something that I've been working on for about 5 years. So I'm going to talk a little about the evolution of this work and the purpose of it as well. And I'm so delighted to go ahead and talk with you today. So I teach at Midstate Technical College. We are a small college in central Wisconsin. And prior to being with Midstate, I actually spent 6 years as a dual credit instructor for them. I have been back and forth between higher ed and the K-12s for all of my career, which is more than 25 years now, I will admit. And I really love thinking about students' learning needs. So in addition to the master's degree that I hold in my subject area, which is communication, I also have a second master's in curriculum and instructional design. And I think you're going to see that as I talk about this work and my own perspective on it. I also really love visual design and graphic design. So I think that's also a big part of what I'm going to share with you today. My approach for my students is transparency as much as possible. I care a whole lot about equitability, both in access and in all of the things I do in my classroom space. So the work that I'm going to share with you is a product of trying to make things as transparent and as equitable as I possibly can for my very diverse student group. Because I'm in the Wisconsin Technical College system, as many of you are, you know that our student population is very widely diverse. While in my own college, we don't have quite as much ethnic or racial diversity as we might in some of the others, we certainly have a great diversity in student background. So about 50% of my students are in that traditional college age, since I am in the liberal arts program, but the other 50% are non-traditional students, often with widely varied backgrounds. And as I came to the work that I'm going to share with you today, I really was trying to find a way to bridge that gap between people's backgrounds, their educational experiences, to try to erase some of those social discrepancies or socioeconomic discrepancies that might exist in my student population when they first come into my classroom. So that is my general background and approach, and I hope that you see this reflected in the work that I'm going to share with you. So today I want to give you just a little background on something called HyperDocs, because that is what evolved into the learning roadmaps that I'm going to share with you. I want to talk with you about my rationale for how I use them and why. And I want to show you some examples in my own classes and in my own classroom spaces of what this could look like. I want to talk about how, if you like these, you could create your own, and I will share resources with you. I'm going to share all of my templates with you. So if you like these ideas, I will give you something to build off of and to try to create your own, should you wish. I also remain open to questions after this session. So I'm really invested in this work. And if you like this and you feel it would have a great application in your own college or classroom, feel free to reach out to me even after the session, and I'm happy to answer questions. I would like to talk as well about OER as one component of these learning roadmaps, because we are here for equitability and we are here to talk about OER use as well. And I want to show you my own Blackboard. While you may use a different learning management system than I do, I think it's really helpful to see these in action in somebody's digital classroom space. And I want to talk about different instructional modalities and ways to use these. So this work began with HyperDocs. HyperDocs came out of the K-12 system, and what they are single documents or steps in a process flowchart that allows students to access everything from a single document. So here's an example of one that might be used in the K-12 system. And what you can see as you start to look at this is you can see the steps of the lesson or the lesson plan. And what I really like about this is everything is linked again out of that single document. And we all know the complexities that COVID threw into our teaching and our instruction. And so many hyperdocs came into use as teachers were trying to find ways in the K-12 system to deliver those lessons virtually with as little confusion for their students as possible. In other words, as much transparency in the process. So this one would be, I think, probably about an 11th grade level, aim for the high school. But what I like about this is, again, it's each step in the process. And then within each step, there are links to access additional materials or parts of the lesson. Again, very helpful. So this is kind of how they started. Here's another example. This one was created in Google Slides, though it could be done in PowerPoint as well, where it's giving steps in a process and then links to share out or work through as a part of that process. So there are some big ideas at play when you're creating these type of hyperdocs, or what will evolve into my learning roadmaps that I'll be sharing with you shortly. Some really big ideas here are that these are intrinsically engaged in chunking. We know students learn better when we chunk that material together, giving them a chance to learn something and then chunk to practice it. And that's a big part of metacognitive strategies for students. I care a whole lot about student metacognition. And in this case, I'm using that as the way that students reflect on their own learning process. I'm very transparent with my own students about their metacognitive process. I talk to them, I use this language, talking to them about things like chunking or giving them things like practice or repeat or reinforce, and I name them using the educational terms with my students, because I think the more that we can make students aware of their own learning and their own process, as well as the strengths and weaknesses that they may have in that process, is really important. So I'm naming the process. I'm trying to focus student attention on their own learning process. And in doing so, I do a lot of micro activities. So I do a lot of short little bursts of learning, and you can visually see, and I'll show you, I'm going to click back one slide. So you can see, thinking about chunking or micro activities, you can see that each one of these squares in a hyperdoc would be created with the idea of chunking or having a micro activity somewhere in it. I'm also thinking, and I'll get to this when I get to my own learning roadmaps, I'm also thinking about differentiation. So obviously all of my students have different needs and different starting points when they come to my instruction. They also have different learning styles. So how can I create something that differentiates, that gives background knowledge so that I can equitably present, not assuming that my students know things coming in, but again, giving that background knowledge for those who don't have it, but also allowing students who do have it to move ahead a little bit more quickly. This comes from anticipating student needs as well. I've been in the field for a long time, and I generally have a sense of where my students are going to need extra help and what type of resource they're going to need in that. So the HyperDoc resources that I started to work with came from a variety of sources, and I will share this again with you at the end. As I started digging into this, I was trying to approach some of the questions of transparency, of equitability, trying to approach how students interacted with my content in my classes. And I started digging into HyperDocs and thinking really hard about how I could adapt this K-12 idea up into higher education so that I could do the things I was just talking about. I could chunk, I could talk about metacognition, I could differentiate, I could increase equitability. All of these were going on as I started to come to this work. So initially, I had several inspirations. The HyperDocs website itself, I would encourage you to look at. This has a whole bunch of templates that can easily be modified, and I'll come back and share those with you a little bit later on. There's a wonderful site called Ditch That Textbook, which is what we're here for today, right? Not necessarily to ditch it, but to talk about different ways that we can provide open education resources to our students. So Ditch That Textbooks talks a whole lot about how to bring in open educational resources for students. I really like this website. I strongly recommend it. And then Teach with Tech has a wonderful blog about getting started with HyperDocs. So I want to say thank you to those who started this work. And I want to show you how I have modified it for my own classroom. So this is what I would call a digital learning roadmap, or a learning roadmap. You'll hear me use that intermittently. And this is one for my English composition class. It's for one of our later in the course tasks, a research paper. But there are a few things I want to direct your attention to about how I organize these. And we're going to just talk about it visually right now, and then kind of zoom back into some of the rationale about how and why I create these things. So I like to make them somewhat similar so my students know what to expect. And I do have to teach my students how to navigate through these at the beginning of each course. So what I talk a whole lot about is I talk about process, and I have them reflect on themselves as learners throughout a process. In this case, it's the writing process. And what I do is I organize my roadmaps to move a student through the learning process. And this can be for writing, but it can also be applied in many other ways. So what I always put right in the center is the assignment, so that they know exactly where we are headed. And I'll click into these a little bit later on, but I want to just give you the overview right now. And I also sometimes include a schedule or some additional notes below. And then what I do is I do what looks like a board game, where they will be working their way through each step in a process, ending with the submission of the work. This allows me to name for them where they are in their writing process or their learning process. So for example, topic selection or researching, and then you can see that I've got the rest of the steps of the writing process. In each one of these squares, I am embedding links, just like you would in a HyperDoc platform. I am embedding links to what I think they will need to create this particular part of the process or to be successful with it. So sometimes it's reteaching materials. I often use templates, like I use an outline template. I provide worked examples. I will embed within each of these squares many times. I will put in a student sample for those who like samples. I can embed instructional videos or outside videos. I will sometimes put in there samples of other work or resources that they would see. I also always include any lecture slides that I'm doing. So whether I'm presenting this material in an online platform, computer conferencing, or face-to-face, I try to make sure that whatever it is I'm teaching in the classroom appears somewhere in their learning roadmap. So as long as my students know what part of the process they're on, hopefully at their fingertips, they should have everything they need to do this part of the process correctly or completely. Now, I came to this because as I was originally putting links in my Blackboard organization, I found that students were accessing those resources less frequently than I wished they would have. And even though I can force students to access content, I wanted them to have more agency, more ownership over what they were accessing and why. And so part of doing work like this is getting them to identify what do they need to complete this step. Are they the sort of student who needs a worked example? Do they like an outline for something? Do they need a reteaching video? And by getting them to reflect on their own needs, I found that they were then clicking onto things that was more valuable for their own learning process, thus increasing their own ownership and their own engagement. And so it also gave me a chance to embed many different things to meet those different learning styles and needs as I put this together. When I had originally started doing this before doing it in a visual format, you can imagine the multitude of resources that I would be dropping into my Blackboard course, and I felt it was almost overwhelming for students. So by doing it in a visual manner, I am very much hoping that students are selecting, and they tell me they do, what they need. Here are a couple more examples. So you can see these are a little more simple or a little more free-flowing than that major summative paper that I was just showing you. So you can see I have a model here on the left-hand side of the screen, and I really like this one. This is the 5 or 4 step learning process. So I've got some things about engagement. I've got a pre-write stage, I've got a drafting stage, and then I've got an editing stage. And again, in there, anything that they would need to complete this assignment is already linked. Everything from presentations to videos to examples or to additional resources are all linked in here. This one on the right-hand side, you can see visually looks a lot like that previous one that I showed. And again, this is from my English 2 class, so this is a rhetorical writing piece, but you can see each step in the process, in the learning process is again laid out and named for them. And I like to let them know exactly what competencies we're working on, and again, the steps in the process. I want it to be visual for them. Another way that I might use this, oh good, I've got a question. Please jump in.
You have a question. How do the quality of student research papers change after implementing HyperDocs?
You know what? Actually, I would say that I've been tracking from a data perspective. Great question. Thank you. Not only completion, but the general grade on it. So I would say my completion rate, I went from, and I want to say I raised about 4% completion rate. So I got more papers turned in, but the real big jump was in the grades on those papers. So as I've been doing this work, and I think I would like to talk about my increase over a couple of years, because as an instructor, I also had to learn how best to teach my students to use these. But I have seen an 8% increase in grades since I started putting these in. So for me, that's significant. Both that increase in completion and the increase in quality of work have been there. And especially when I'm working with my younger students, you know, those who are just out of high school right now, this kind of game element to it or self-selection element to it really seems to appeal to that learning style in that particular demographic group. So I think that might be generational as well. So I am also seeing higher completion within my students who are in the younger age, you know, like 27 and under. But my students who are over 27 years old, I'm not seeing any decrease either. So they're kind of holding steady, but it's in that COVID learning group that I'm really seeing increases and jumps. And for me, that's important because I'm working really hard to make up that gap. Did that answer that? I hope so. Okay. Let me show you the next one then. Please jump back in if I didn't answer completely. So the next one I want to show you is a choice menu. This also is another learning roadmap, and I use this in my children's literature course that's geared towards a lot of elementary education major students. So this is really a lot of fun. And what I do is I ask them actually to use this in a flipped classroom manner. So they would do this prior to coming to my class. And I want to have more rich and engaged discussions within my classroom. So what I ask them to do is I ask them to select certain things. Each of these are resources, some are readings, some are scholarly, some are not, some are YouTube videos, etc. And I ask them to select and work their way through this. And in doing so, it means that many of my students will have varied perspectives to offer in a discussion or a lecture setting. They also use the information from this when they write a book review, which is part of my portfolio that I do at the end as a high impact practice. But within this, by giving them some choice and some agency, I find that my students often will watch more than I've asked them to or read more than I've asked them to, which is really an interesting side piece of doing this. So at the very least, doing a menu option like this allows me to have diversity in discussion and allow them to self-select what is most interesting and what is most relevant to where they are in their own learning process. So usually when I try to do these, for example, one of the two entrees would be a little lower level, a little more background knowledge building, and the other would be selected so that a student with a higher level of background knowledge would have a challenge that they could reach for. And I'm always thinking about that. Again, I'm thinking about differentiation. At what level am I presenting these things? I'm thinking about learning styles. Am I hitting multiple learning styles? I like having things in squares because it's really easy for me to identify what I'm missing then as an instructor. If I can look at a square on a learning roadmap and I can say, oh, they're missing, for example, something might be looking a little weak under how to annotate. What can I add into this to make sure that I'm hitting those learning styles? And it holds me personally accountable to what I'm presenting and how. So again, I really like that. I'm a visual person. So for me, looking at it organized in this manner makes a whole lot of sense. This is another example of a choice menu. So this one is again from my children's literature course, but tic-tac-toe menus are a whole lot of fun, and that increases student ownership because they're picking out what they need to explore. They're picking out what product they want to produce. And I did get this template from Casey Bell, who does Shake Up Learning. I will share her resource with you later. Again, really excellent. So I like choice menus. I try to incorporate these at least once in each of my classes whenever possible. But again, student ownership and engagement embedded here. And I can give them different options of different types of product to produce, which I think is a great way for them to show what they know and also engage their own creativity while they're doing it. So,
Stacia, we do have another question.
Great, go for it, please.
What software do you use in creating your HyperDoc?
Yep, great question. The answer is there are many software programs you can use. A lot of the templates that you're going to find if you want to build off of an existing template are Google Docs templates or Google Slides. However, I have used Canva, I have used Photoshop, I have even done this in Word. So basically anywhere you can embed a link, you can create a piece of content like this. I like choosing one that has a flow chart or a visual flow right away. So for me, I like Canva and I like using Google Docs for this. And frankly, I don't always have time to develop my own. So I'm going to share some folders of resources with everyone at the end. So I really like to take other people's templates and play with them, right? So I can always take someone else's. I love the 5E lesson plan model, which you'll find in my shared materials. I really like the model that I have where it's kind of that roadmap, and you've seen me show a couple of those for my own courses. So anywhere where you can create a flow chart, you can create this. Do whatever you're comfortable with. I know some higher ed faculty are less comfortable with Google Docs than K-12 folks, for example, but it's fairly easy and intuitive to work with. So thank you for that question. Great question.
I have another question for you.
Yes, please.
Do you embed the HyperDoc into pages in your LMS?
I sure do. And if you give me just 1 second, I'm going to show you my LMS and I'm going to show you that I embed it. And what's wonderful about this is if you're playing with Google Docs and you're working in Google Docs, you can actually embed and then if I have multiple sections and I make a change in my document and I'm using embed code, it automatically updates all of my courses, which saves me a whole lot of time going back in. So I will be there in just 1 second. Hold that question. I promise you're about to see, okay? So just quick little point on incorporating OER content. It's very easy to embed OER content into this. Whether you're working with an OER textbook, you can just throw the link in for the direct reading you want them to do. Or I also link a whole lot of other relevant resources. So I think one of our later sessions today is Capturing OER in the Wild, which is a marvelous title, but that's essentially what you're doing, right? You're remixing resources that you find that you want your students to access or have access to as a part of the process, and you're remixing them by putting them into this template or flowchart format. So why should you use these? And then I'm going to show you my classroom. I'm hoping that you're seeing here it's visually scaffolded. So for your learners who are visual and for you as an instructor, it shows exactly what learning is happening in each square. There's lots of differentiation in this. I use it for absence recovery as well. So if a student misses my class, they have a chance I can let them know just what square of the learning roadmap we were working on, and they can hop in there and work on it themselves. I use it for flipped classroom, as I showed you with my children's literature thing. So if I want them to access a series of resources prior to coming to my classroom, I use it for that. It meets multiple learning styles. I think it's very clear for my students once I teach them how to use it. I will say that the first time students open my classroom, they look a little startled. So I'm always very careful to record instructional videos about what to expect, how to work their way through it. And we talk about the metacognitive parts of it. It also is awesome for my academic support staff. So we have some really wonderful tutors at Midstate who do work with some of my students, my English language learning students, or some who just need extra assistance. And for them, it puts all of the resources from my classroom right in their hands, which I have heard from them is very valuable and very helpful. So how do I use them in my classroom? I'm going to hop on over here and show you my classroom. And we are working in Blackboard. I know you may have a different LMS, but I think many of these ideas are going to translate for you. And I want to show you, we have both, some of my classes are not in Ultra yet. So I'm going to show you not in Ultra, and then I'll show you in Blackboard Ultra. And let's just start here with my English composition class. So when I create a learning plan, this is what it will look like for my students. And I really like what this does for cleaning up the visual space of Blackboard or learning management. So I always start with my learning activities on the top, and then using the embed code, I embed the learning roadmap. So students come to this and everything is absolutely right in front of them. And everything links right out of it. So for example, the assignment, if they click on that, that takes them right to the assignment and the expectations that I'm looking for. Any step they would need, for example, engage or explore, and how to do their pre-write, etc., all the way down. And then I always put Turnitin. And then I have a folder where they submit their assignments for that particular unit. And so by embedding it, this does a couple of really cool things. For me, it allows me, again, if I have multiple sections, all I need to do is change it on the original document, and then it automatically updates, which I love. And then also by embedding it, I make sure that it's front and center, and that learning is exactly what my students are seeing when they get in here. So it's not, are you going to access this? It's right here in front of you. And hopefully everything they would need to do it. So here's another one. This one's for a scholarship assignment. And again, I have that document embedded right there, and they turn in right below. So I do give them a very extensive tour when they first start using my classroom so that they know what to expect. I can show you, this is my technical reporting class, and this one follows much of that same idea. So again, this is what they're going to see. This is a nice model as well. I like this one. So I have a reading, an assignment, a discussion Padlet, and
Asia,
where they submit. Yes.
we are seeing the same screen.
Oh, no, thank you so much for letting me know. Okay, let me figure out how to do this. Hold on. Well, that doesn't help me very much. I'm so grateful for you to let me know that. So hold up. Now I'm going to have to do that section again. You all, thank you for telling me. Okay, now are you seeing my Blackboard screen?
Yes, we are.
Yay, okay, success. All right, this is just like when I'm teaching an online night class and I'm going to South for 2 minutes and someone finally tells me. All right, so let's do this again. I want to show you this and I will explain much more briefly because you heard me talk about this already. So here we have traditional Blackboard. I do have some in Ultra and some in the original Blackboard view. But again, each one of my units are laid out. And as students open a unit, they see their learning activities on top. The next thing they see is the roadmap. Again, right front and center for them so that they can access what they need right here. And then they turn in assignments and the folder in the bottom. So if I'm a student and I open this up, it's visually really clean. And I can select things within each square to link out of. So for example, if they would click in the center here, it would bring them to the newspaper article assignment, etc. So another example of that, really quick, the scholarship essay. So same kind of idea. Activities are up on the top, the steps in the process to complete them, and then the assignment folder on the bottom where they would turn things in. All right. So that's kind of what those look like. I want to show you my tech reporting class, which you'll see is organized much the same way. But I do like the format in these HyperDocs a little more, so I'm excited to show this to you. So we've got our competencies, we've got our learning activities and assignments, and then this is what they're working their way through visually in this unit. And they turn in here at the bottom. Right, so any links they would need are always there. This is a little more complex in Blackboard Ultra. So here is a version of Ultra that I'd like to show you. It does still work though. So I'll just open up one of these learning plans. And here it does force the student to move through my intro video, through the competencies and into the learning roadmap. So in Ultra, it looks like this, if it'll open for me. And then the students do have to do the drop down here. So the one thing I dislike about this is it's not quite as front and center, but here it is in Ultra. And again, very much the same thing so that each step in the process is laid out for them. One other one that I'd like to show you, actually, I think that'll be about it because I'm looking at our timing here. So I'm going to come back and I am going to share a different screen here.
While you are going to the other screen, I do have a question.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Quality Matters? If so, do these roadmaps reflect those guidelines?
So I wish I knew more about Quality Matters. And so I hesitate to answer that, actually. Generally speaking, I am up to date with curriculum materials and meeting whatever standards are out there, but I don't want to answer that incorrectly. So I'm going to say no on that one, okay? All right, so how do I use them in my classroom? I hope I have shown you in my organization here. And how to get started with these in your classroom is, I think, after playing around with these, it's an experimental process, to be honest. I chose one course to begin with when I first started using these. And I thought really hard about the process I wanted my students to go through in each one of the units. And so for that, I chose a template. I will share a resource folder with you in the chat in just a couple of minutes. So please use anything out of that. Feel free to make a copy, have it. If it's mine, it's yours. You can also search HyperDocs, which if you just search that, there are tons there. Those are more geared to the K-12s, but again, they are modifiable very easily. Check out Shake Up Learning. That's one of my favorite sites. There's a big Twitter community out there about HyperDocs. If you search learning roadmaps, you're not going to find as much, but if you search HyperDocs, you will find a whole lot. And then Ditch That Textbook is another one of my favorite sites, as I shared earlier. So basically my first step, and often the hardest one, is choosing the template that I want to work from. And then I really start thinking about what's the workflow and the learning flow for this. So I label each section for that workflow, and then I start to shift my resources into it. And what's really nice is once you've shifted your resources in, you can visually see where you have gaps, what you might be missing, and you can check against what your own parameters are for equitability, access, differentiation, etc. Please consider embedding your lecture videos or your slides in there. I'll tell you that is a continual work in process. So for me, I don't always have a lecture video in every square. I'm working on that. But I do at least put some sort of a video or audio resource in each square to help. And it really helps to have an outside collaborator look at these too once you've got them partially built, making sure that what makes sense to you makes sense to others who are viewing it. I also involve my students. So first thing, I always show them how to navigate the roadmap and we talk about it. And I always organize my learning plans in a same or similar way. Hopefully you saw that, so that my students know what to expect when they open it up. But I'm also asking them, what's not in here that you wish was here? I try to anticipate their resource needs, but sometimes they'll share with me that, hey, it would be really helpful if you had blank in this square. And so by opening that dialogue, it's allowed me over the last 5 years to really tailor these to the types of questions my student population has. So that feedback piece is always really important. And I think for me, keep revising. It's a living unit. So I revise them, I refresh them as I need, I play with them. I'm forever adding things, or if students tell me that they may not need anything, need something that's in a square, I might pull it out. So there's always this process of like back and forth. That's what I do in the summer, is I kind of play back and forth with what's in there. It makes it really easy to build classes in an LMS, because then you're not putting all those things in individually, but you're putting them in as a document, which is great. I use them for face-to-face, computer conferencing, online. I use them for flipped classroom, and I am a dual credit mentor, as some of you may be. So I actually provide these to my mentees out in the K-12 system for them to use in their own learning management systems. So it's a great way for me to be able to give my units and assessments and competencies and everything they would need to the instructors that I'm working with. And I've had great feedback from them. So gosh, I have 14 English composition dual credit instructors that I work with. And so this is out in the K-12 system in our area, and they really appreciate having everything at their fingertips as well as instructors. So I am going to click on this, and I'm going to come on back to our meeting and answer any questions that you might have. I did want to leave 5 minutes or so for some Q&A. So I'm going to throw a link in the chat here. That's going to have all sorts of things that hopefully will help you. All right.
As of right now, I do not have any new questions in the chat, just some positive feedback. Thanks for showing the roadmaps in both traditional Blackboard and Blackboard Ultra. My school just switched to Ultra, and
Okay.
it's helpful to see how you set them up in both versions. I also teach presentation. Yep, and
Good.
this session has been super helpful.
Wonderful. Hey, teacher, if you want to reach out to me afterwards, feel free to do that as well. I am happy to share. I am a great giver, so you can literally have all of my units and tweak them for your own.
And then another comment, thank you, so informational. Another one, thanks, you've inspired me to create learning roadmaps for my online astronomy class.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I really hope that this was helpful for you. And I do hope that you try at least playing with this a little bit. Feel free to access those resources. Feel free to copy. If you are not seeing the link to the resources, it'll be from me to all panelists at 10:39. It should say my MSTC. Maybe it's because it's all panelists. Hold up. Let me try this one more time, everybody. Now you know I'm a human. Hopefully you see them now. Yay, perfect, wonderful. And I'm going to also put my email in the chat. And if you want to reach out later, again, I'm happy to share anything with you. I am a giver of resources. So, hey, the better for everybody if we can make our education system equitable, transparent, easy to navigate, and meeting our students where they are. So thank you.
If there are no other questions, then we will end this presentation. I just want to say a special thanks to our presenter for presenting today and all of the valuable information. And thank you to all of our attendees who joined us today.
Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend. Take care.